Welcome back to the Saving Canada podcast. I'm your host, Bartholomew Crenshaw. With me, as always, Jack Newsman. And Jack, out of all the people in Canada, who do you think is supposed to be Trudeau's base? Who does he always pander to? Who's he going to give everything to? That he's always trying to garner their support by promising things. What do you think?
Well, one of the first ones that comes to mind is our Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I mean, he promises them way more even than the French people. So when he went to the Aboriginal or the North American Indigenous Games, a lot of people probably did not think that this would be the reception he gets, but this is how far he has slid in what a lot of people would consider the Liberals' like primary bank of votes. So let's check out this video of his reception at these Indigenous Games. That is savage, man. That is beyond savage. That is one of the worst booings I've ever seen in history.
Well, and there's tons of like other videos if you go look it up from all kinds of different angles. It's everyone, it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Vast majority.
Absolutely, yeah. So Trudeau, right there, it just goes to show. I mean, no wonder he's, well, the last we saw, 82% of all Canadians want him out of that.
Everywhere he goes, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everywhere he goes.
Western Canada, they tell him to get the hell out of Western Canada. Ontario, half the time he's getting kicked out of... Didn't he just get kicked out of... I think it was like Bellevue or somewhere in Ontario?
Somewhere, but he goes through towns quick and they stop, get pictures, and then people hear about it. Like, wait, he was here?
Yeah.
I've heard many people tell me stories like that. It's like, yeah, they're just zipping through to get the pictures for Instagram or whatever, right?
Yeah. And
but... it's not going well.
Well, it's the old story, man. By the end, they won't be able to walk their own streets, right? And we're seeing it definitely happen. Mark Rutte, the most recent of the World Economic Forum young global leaders that has had to step down. I mean, you cannot keep a Canadian Prime Minister, especially for the Liberal Party, that is getting booed like that at the Aboriginal Games. It's just impossible. So I really don't think he has that much time left. I've been saying it for a year. I'm going to keep saying it this time. I think they just can't.
Like, he's just clinging. He's clinging on, right? It's just like, when's he going to let go finally, right?
Yeah. And it's certainly not for any reason of being able to win a next election. It's just to deliver policy while he's already in power, right? But everything he signs, all these bills he keeps signing and everything, nobody's going to go along with. Western Canada's breaking away with him over all the environmental stuff, right? So
yeah, it's falling apart.
It's definitely falling apart. The weight of his legislation is very, very weak, especially on legal grounds. Most of it's completely unconstitutional. We actually received really good email. Somebody, I think Miaja sent it to me, and it was about how Quebec had seemingly, according to the links provided, written in like a forced vaccination policy. If, for example, a new pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization, that Quebec could bring people to a facility and force them to get vaccinated. So, I mean, that for me, that's going to take a little more research into, like, is this actually written into law? I'm not quite sure yet. But if it is, it's going to be a real fast track to pitchforks and torches, right? So
if that's the route they're thinking, that's where they want to take this. Good luck.
Well, think about what happened in New Zealand. Okay, so there was a horrible, call it atrocity, but really a misuse of power by Jacinda Ardern when two parents were trying to have a blood transfusion.
They required blood transfusions. Yeah, there was some surgery they needed. I think it was a transplant, perhaps. But yeah, they needed blood infusions, and they were requesting unvaccinated blood.
Right, right. And so Jacinda Ardern denies this for those parents, and maybe it's related and maybe it's not. I tend to think that Jacinda Ardern's resignation weeks later, I think there's kind of just a level of tyranny that is so disgusting that a person's career will be just ended by it immediately. I really do find it hard to believe that one most atrocious scene that got worldwide attention and Jacinda Ardern's soon after sudden resignation, it's hard for me to believe that they're not connected, right?
Well, the more and more time goes on, and we see this kind of playing out with different people as well, it seems I'm more tending to, lean towards what you're saying. I think it was very closely following that event.
Yeah, and I mean Mark Rutte, his farming policies,
atrocious, right? They were just going to seize everyone's land and turn them into migrant camps.
Yeah. So, but then, like, if you actually think about it carefully, what happened was, so the Farmers Party won a whole bunch of seats in the government, and then Mark Rutte, despite the whole country voting in a way that they've never voted before because they were so against the I don't know if it was 500 farms or whatever, but he had actually just decided to go forward with his farm confiscation plan, despite the huge difference in the makeup of the government in the Netherlands. And once again, all of the farmers mobilized into like a new, just the newest of many, many, many convoys they've been doing for a whole year. Then you can say Mark Rutte, between that assertion that despite how the people voted, he was still going to confiscate all those farms, and his resignation, the time difference was only a couple of weeks in that. You see what I'm saying? It's like there's one act of giant tyranny, and then these people seem to just not survive it.
Well, and that's where this illegal migrant issue seems to be heading in the UK.
Yeah.
It's to a boiling point. Like one of these instances where it's so obvious that they're against the people.
For sure. And like in the Netherlands, of course, they also attached the migrant issue more so than the farm confiscation issue, but it's all attached, as we know. But I tend to think that farm confiscation issue is like a far more egregious, just absolute destruction of people's rights. And that's why I tend to attribute his resignation sort of more to that. Maybe it's just my personal opinion, but I do think that these great acts of the destruction of the Constitution, we haven't seen somebody get away with it really yet. I mean, Trudeau is the closest example, but he doesn't have political support. He just had a long time till his next election. The Canadian justice system has collapsed. This is an article done by True North News' Harrison Faulkner on Ratioed. And so talking about Justin Trudeau and the collapse of his popularity, again, the reason that he's so ridiculously unpopular is that he treats everybody like a subject and as if he's above the law. So let's take a look at what Harrison Faulkner has to say about the justice system and how Justin Trudeau is abusing it.
It's safe to say that the Canada you likely grew up in is no longer the Canada that you and I live in. For example, things are suddenly impossible to afford. The idea of owning a home is out of sight for millions of Canadians. Maybe you realize that entry-level, low-skilled jobs are filled with people who aren't even born in Canada. Maybe you've also realized that our trains and planes no longer run on time, or that Canadian infrastructure is failing. Or, for example, that our cities are unusually filthy and dangerous to live in. But perhaps the most striking condition of New Canada, if we can call it that, is the complete and total collapse of the Canadian justice system. For the first time in most of our lives, we are seeing political prisoners in Canada, while repeat violent criminal offenders are released back onto the streets through our revolving door bail system. You see, as repeat violent criminal offenders and even accused murderers are released back onto the streets, the so-called Coots 4, who have been charged with conspiracy to commit murder of an RCMP officer, a serious crime, have been held in jail for over 515 days. Well, we don't actually know why, because a court order prohibits publishing those details. What on earth is going on in this country? I mean, to say something is broken would be an epic understatement.
All right, I'll pause it there. So, yeah, these political prisoners, the Coots prisoners, long ago should the government have had to make their case that these guys had some kind of conspiracy to kill an RCMP officer.
Yeah, they should certainly be out on bail.
Yeah.
Because they haven't proceeded with anything.
Oh, yeah, and people who have actually committed crimes are out on bail.
Well, especially when there's this new perspective that people are waking up to as to what these blockades were actually about, and it was breaking this authoritarian regime's control over Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
So you have well over 500 days already in jail, and you could be totally innocent. I'm 99% sure they are totally innocent. I mean, even Andrew Tate over in, was it Romania? They didn't hold him more than 90 days. Or it was some long amount of days, but they eventually had to let him go.
It was still more days than I'd want to spend in a Romanian prison.
Yeah,
still,
that's
it was
true.
a fraction of this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is getting into mind-blowing territory, 500 and something days. There should definitely be people in Alberta. I'm sure there are, but we've definitely got to fight to get these political prisoners, the Coos blockade guys out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. What's the government? What are you going to do about this? Exactly.
Yeah, and what's wrong with they should have to report what's wrong with the legal system such that this hasn't been taken care of yet. Like, they should be on the news every day explaining themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's what we got to push for. We got to get journalists constantly in their face. Looks like True North is doing their part, but Justin Trudeau has to answer for this, right? Why has the evidence not been presented? Why have they not gone to court?
Yeah, this is Canada. No one should be in jail that long without having some answers.
Absolutely. And so, as everybody in Canada is quickly becoming aware, Justin Trudeau has raised the migrant populations now that are being allowed into the country. I think it was 1 million last year, and he wants to do 1.5 million next year.
Yeah, there's an article, remember? It was bragging about how great that is.
Oh, yeah. So, anyways, there's a massive unemployment problem. Now, it's caused, I think, a lot by the fact that nobody wants to work. There's nothing for young 20-somethings to look forward to because you can't really buy a house. They basically can't afford their own place until they're 30 years old, while the economy is prohibitive to Canadians actually taking low entry jobs. Now, Justin Trudeau is filling those with migrants. In the UK, they have an even worse situation, it seems, where now they're advertising to the third world, hey, if you come to the UK, this is all the free stuff you're going to get. Check this out. This is nuts.
Are you wondering why so many migrants are trying to come across the Channel, one of the biggest shipping lanes in the whole of the world? Well, it's because of this. It's because your government, the British government, advertises to these asylum seekers what you'll get. Let me tell you what you'll get if you're an asylum seeker in the UK, whether you're actually an asylum seeker or whether you were perfectly safe in France, for example. You'll get somewhere to live, a cash allowance, or both. You can choose whether you want a flat, a house, a hostel, or bed and breakfast. How lovely is that? I wonder if we serve it to them in bed. I do hope so. Cash support, you'll get £37.75 for every person in your household to help you pay for things like food, clothing and toiletries. I am actually reading this from the government website. Your allowance will be loaded onto a debit card each week to make it easy for you to spend what you want to spend. Isn't that nice? And even if you've been refused asylum seeker, you're a failed asylum seeker in my country, your country, you'll be given somewhere to live and £35.39 per person on a payment card. This is what we're handing out, and then we go on to tell them you may get free National Health Service, such as to see a doctor or get hospital treatment. You'll get free prescriptions for medicine, free eye tests, free glasses. I ask you, as a British citizen, as someone that's paid in all their lives, do you get free prescriptions? Have you been offered a free place to live or somewhere that gives you bed and breakfast? Have you been offered £300 maternity payment just because you're having a baby? I thought not. These are people who are here often illegally, and this is what we promise them. And is it any wonder that they choose to come? This country is a soft touch. It's time we started standing up for the British nationals who live here and our ex-service personnel who are offered nothing like this, nothing of the sort. In March 2018, close to 50,000 people were in receipt of these kind of benefits. Stop making our country a joke. Start standing up for our own.
So, as you can see, the United Kingdom is dealing with the same incompetent nonsense that all the young global leaders of the World Economic Forum have put in, which is mass migration to destroy the culture of nations that have charters of rights and freedoms. Essentially, that's what they want.
They're weakening all the strongest countries, essentially.
Yeah.
And they're bleeding money doing this. It's all of our own country's money. In this case, it's the UK's money. You're funding this. Yeah.
Yeah, and as fast as possible, they want to turn those into votes for themselves because they've lost so many votes just from their terrible policies. So that's another reason to have this migration thing going on. But yeah, it just boggled my mind what they were doing as far as like the advertising side of that thing. If everybody in the United Kingdom knew about that, I imagine, well, it'd be one more giant revolt. I mean, they've been revolting about all kinds of stuff over there. And in Ireland, they've been revolting over this is now, I mean, we first heard of this a few weeks back. I think we reported on it. But the Irish government has decided that they just want to kill 200,000 head of cattle just because. That'll fix climate change, basically, and save the world. But it's funny that all of their ideas to save the world are taking away either our productivity or our food.
Yeah.
Right? There's no ways that they're saving the world that actually, we can just do without. It's just
or asserting more control. That's like the only three things it could be. It seems.
Yeah, asserting. Yeah, that's true. Land, control over the land, especially as well.
Yeah, or like technology. Like you all have to do this now. Do we?
Yep. Yeah. Have the app, the carbon emissions app, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is a really good report about what's going on in Ireland.
Her name escapes me too, and we've shown her videos before. Someone should know.
Anyway, yeah.
Someone will inform us.
Yeah, I feel bad, but post in the comments below if you know this girl's name. Check it out.
The weirdest possible news, the Irish government is putting forward a proposal to massacre 200,000 dairy cows because of climate change. All of this is simultaneously happening while the American agricultural industry is being directly attacked, that the emissions from cows, both in the dairy and the meat industry, are destroying the environment. And also this week, the USDA gave the green light for the first ever lab-grown meat, financed by people like Bill Gates. Let's just play my favorite game for a second, the tinfoil hat game. Isn't this all happening at the same time that those same billionaires are buying up millions of acres of farmland to wipe out any competition? And the literal best part about all of this is a study from UC Davis is showing that lab-grown meat could be 25 times worse for the environment than the meat industry. And thank God for the fact checkers on the internet letting us know this lab-grown meat definitely won't cause cancer, even though scientists have been raising the alarm for the last several years that pluripotent stem cells used to create lab-grown meat can in fact mess with tumor suppressor signaling. Who would stand to benefit from you needing cancer drugs? Oh yeah, the same people that are investing into lab-grown meat that also finance the pharmaceutical industry.
So yeah, not only do you have it so that the lab-grown meat industry is trying to replace actual meat, which is insane to me. I mean, it's, of course, I can't actually fathom it ever happening. But
it's on the losing front already, because the Beyond Meat stuff, which I don't even think is lab-grown meat, is a flop already. Yeah. So that's on the losing battlefield. That kind of this Beyond Meat and etc. lab-grown meat, right?
Yeah, like veggie burgers and veggie dogs were actually in some way popular amongst, vegetarians and stuff. But this lab-grown meat has never had any interest whatsoever. So
unless I was starving to death on an island, I suppose.
Yeah,
I may actually consider it then, maybe. Yeah, I'd be like, who made this? Bill Gates? I'd rather die.
Yeah.
Die there on the beach.
How they would think that they could replace just cows walking around a field and feeding themselves, or even commercial factory farming, like how you could be more efficient than that. And apparently these studies say, no, they're 25% or 25 times less efficient. So their own arguments basically talk their way out of this as a replacement. So the lab-grown meat, yeah, sure, it can cause cancer or whatever. Nobody's going to eat it anyway. I don't care.
Yeah, when all these things have relied on the false narratives that are fed through the media.
Yeah.
Right, even like all the subsidies given, all the green energy shit. It's all been just by convincing people through all their control mechanisms, right? Through the media, and that's all collapsed. So all of these things that they're trying are going to be failing hard.
Yeah. So here's Kamala Harris explaining all the things that they are trying. So in this situation, Kamala Harris admits by listing alongside others that depopulation is in fact one of their political strategies for managing the environment. Check it out.
Think about the impact on something like public health. When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
So she's basically saying, oh, the reason that we're investing in green energy and electric cars and depopulation is so that our children can breathe cleaner air. So
They now they claim that was a gaffe, but I don't know.
That's just the quiet part out loud. I mean, you're not supposed to include that in the speech,
yeah.
I don't think.
I'm of that line of thinking.
But, I mean, Kamala Harris straight out comes up and says that they're focusing on depopulation. That's just wild to hear actually spoken out loud.
Actually, the amount of times that these people have slipped up and said exactly that, it's just like, that's way too unlikely. Because this is like at least the 10th time I've heard someone say shit like that, including Bill Gates has said things along those lines.
Yeah, well, Bill Gates
by
says
accident.
it to like his investors that are going to hear about all the great things that his vaccines can do. But that's so funny though too, because he says if we do really good with vaccines, then population will decrease by 10 or 20%, and then people again try to apologize for that. They try to pretend he's saying something he wasn't saying. I mean, what he was saying is if they get enough people to take these vaccines, they can expect population decline of 15%. Well, I mean, that's not too out of line with what we're seeing as far as what the first couple of vaccines have done. Thank God so many people stopped before the third, fourth, and fifth.
And what could have happened if they continued. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so here's our next one. But anyway, he just lays out, he's in a congressional hearing, I believe. He's a Johns Hopkins doctor. Slams the government for being, the United States government for being the top source of misinformation. Of course, we've all been saying this for quite some time. We've heard it many, many times. But he actually lays out some specifics that are good to hear from an actual doctor.
The latest perpetrator of misinformation during the pandemic has been the United States government. Misinformation that COVID was spread through surface transmission, that vaccinated immunity was far greater than natural immunity, that masks were effective. Now we have the definitive Cochrane review. What do you do with that review? Cochrane is the most authoritative evidence body in all of medicine and has been for decades. Do you just ignore it, not talk about it? That myocarditis was more common after the infection than the vaccine. Not true. It's 4 to 28 times more common after the vaccine. That young people benefit from a booster. Misinformation. Our two top experts on vaccines quit the FDA in protest over this particular issue, pushing boosters in young, healthy people. The data was never there. That's why the CDC never disclosed hospitalization rates among boosted Americans under age 50. We've seen something which is unforgivable, and that is the weaponization of medical research itself. The CDC putting out their own shoddy studies, like their own study on natural immunity, looking at one state for 2 months, when they had data for years on all 50 states. Why did they only report that one sliver of data? Why did they salami slice the giant database? Because it gave them the result they wanted.
Yeah. So it was all about just the weaponization of the entire data collecting system, the entire health system. We watched the whole thing happen, which means, I mean, there are so many people to hold responsible for the deaths. One of the biggest ones for me, I think it'll be the biggest one ever dealt with, maybe, is Midazolam murders in UK and the remdesivir in the United States, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think
and
those
people are pursuing those hardcore.
Oh yeah, a huge number of people are pursuing those, including Dr. Artis and others. And but I think those are going to be the most easily proven mass murders by the government.
And payment schemes for murder.
Yeah, exactly. So that is, it's just well put. This is like all during a time when the Democrat Party are trying to put together their Ministry of Truth still, where they get to decide what's misinformation and what's not. And Justin Trudeau is doing that in Canada as well, of course, with Bill C-18. We're now seeing the effects of not being able to post any news articles on Facebook and Instagram. Now, to me, it's not as huge of a deal as a lot of people are making it out to be, because I think everybody's going to move off of Facebook and Instagram anyway.
Yeah. We were just talking about this. I think there's like a mass awakening of like the intelligent people in Canada that are now like, okay, I think we may have messed up, and we're listening, and I think people are figuring it out. So I think there's a lot of people now that are awake, and that's just been the last few months or maybe even weeks. Yeah. People really like learning everything and catching up to speed, where most of us have been for well over a year or two, or even 3.
Oh yeah, and fortunately, thanks to like a bunch of our listeners and everybody else that are knee or even shoulder deep in the swamp of all of this stuff, fighting against the powers that be here in Canada, all the people that were standing on shore, just because they're just taking their first steps in and they're getting ankle deep in this stuff, there's now millions and millions and millions of people joining the fight, right? So, of course, it's going to take them some time to get as far as us, but the signs are looking good that the peasants' revolt is on and pretty much in full right now.
Oh, yeah. And has been for some time, man.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just getting so much more interesting.
It is getting more interesting. Well, everywhere that we look, another globalist looks like he's absolutely surrounded by enemies. And continuing in his battle is Anthony Fauci. And it seems like his number one nemesis is Rand Paul. So Rand Paul here is essentially grilling Fauci on how he lied about the gain-of-function research. A lot of you guys have seen some of this stuff, but this video here, this is like a nice takedown video that I think some of you guys will appreciate.
It is a crime to lie to Congress. Do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
You are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Do you think that Dr. Fauci intentionally lied under oath to Senator Paul when he vehemently denied NIH's funding of gain-of-function research?
I think there's no doubt that NIH was funding gain-of-function research.
Is it likely that American tax dollars funded the gain-of-function research that created this virus?
I think it did, not only from NIH, but from the State Department, USAID, and from DOD.
So, in your expert opinion, was the Wuhan Institute conducting gain-of-function research on coronaviruses? Thank you.
Dr. Redfield, did you agree, in your opinion, with Dr. Anderson's assessment at the time that this virus did look engineered?
It was very disconcerting to me. It looked like this virus was engineered.
In one sentence, can you provide a definition of gain-of-function research?
I think it's to take a pathogen and try to increase one of two things or both, to increase its transmissibility or its pathogenicity.
Has gain-of-function stopped a pandemic, in your opinion?
No, on the contrary, I think it probably caused the greatest pandemic our world has seen.
No, I definitely don't think that. I don't think there was any big pandemic. I do think that they were messing around with some cold viruses and tried to release something, but people could just fight it off, right? Yeah. And it just was another thing added to the list of thousands and thousands of cold viruses that are going around the world all the time. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was. Maybe they thought that it was going to be bigger than it was, but it all became about the vaccines anyway, right? So these people that are.
In the beginning of creating this new future, right? The Great Reset, these eco cities, all this shit.
Yeah.
Smart cities.
Yeah. But the people who focus on, Fauci created the greatest pandemic that we've seen in our lifetimes. It's like, where? No.
But certainly that video ain't helping them, and that video is all over Instagram.
Well, that's the whole, So I guess that's the point of showing it, though, is that, Fauci is, it's only a matter of time, I think, until, you know how they came out with the movie about Fauci that was like how great he was? It's only a matter of time until you get the movie about what a terrible person he was, right? Especially, I mean, you could have this movie go through the AIDS pandemic and everything, all the lies that he was saying back then. You could have a real blockbuster movie that just tears apart the real Anthony Fauci, what a liar he is, and how many murders he's responsible for. Dude, the puppy experiments.
Yeah, that'd be a killer. You could, make a seriously a documentary or a movie.
Yeah,
for sure.
And just absolutely destroy his reputation. And if you can do that, think about how that extends to all the people that sided with him on the Democrat side, right? So that'd be a great way to convert a ton of leftover lefties.
Leftover lefties. That's a good term.
Yeah,
I like that.
So shockingly, July 21st, this is according to Becker News, Rand Paul's office building catches fire one day after referring Fauci for prosecution.
Suspicious.
It is suspicious.
What a coincidence, eh?
Yeah. So, by Kyle Becker, whether it's pure coincidence or an act of arson, two possible explanations. Senator Rand Paul's office was burned in a fire that broke out in Bowling Green, Kentucky on early Friday morning. The fire follows one day after the Kentucky senator referred Dr. Anthony Fauci, former director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, for prosecution to the Department of Justice. Man, these Democrats, some of these Democrats, they're just connected. You know what I mean? Fauci being one of them. Clearly the Clintons. Like, there's people that if you do stuff to them, something happens to you.
Oh, yeah. And this is a clear example of clearly there's some shit going on right now.
Well, even if you just think of Rand Paul. Okay, so he got assaulted.
One of his aides, or wasn't it?
Well, he himself got assaulted first, and this was quite a long time back. And he was with his wife in a crowd or something like that, and I don't know if he broke something or if he fell, but it was like minorly serious. And then, not too long back, only a couple or a few months ago, his aide actually got viciously attacked to the point where I think he was stabbed in the head. Okay, here's the article. Thank you, Jack. Senator Rand Paul says his aide was brutally attacked in D.C. Said a staff member was stabbed in broad daylight last weekend.
That was March 28th of this year.
Yeah. And then, like, the day or 2 days after he refers Anthony Fauci to be prosecuted, his office goes up in Kentucky on fire. So Rand Paul, it seems like, has the most brutal attacks going after him, right? Like, and he's the one attacking Anthony Fauci. And Anthony Fauci just so happens to be until his resignation, the highest paid U.S. official.
Yeah, higher than the president.
Higher than the president.
The money he was making from the military bonus for conducting the gain of function research instead of having the Pentagon do it. And that's why it was all offshored under Obama.
Yeah.
Because people were tripping out over it, and he was doing it offshore in Wuhan. Yeah.
So it's basically danger pay he's been getting paid to be the fall guy if people find out. Well, it seems
that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, so it seems like people have found out, so I hope it's worth the money, Fauci. But, it's really interesting that the guy going after Fauci is getting more actual physical attacks on him than even a Donald Trump, say, where all the attacks are legal.
Yeah.
Right? So, really interesting stuff. I mean, it does speak well for Rand Paul that he's actually on our side, because sometimes I do question that. I feel like he's just a tunnel vision kind of guy.
Yeah. He's certainly he appears to be going after one of the guys that needs to be taken down.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to jump over to Robert F. Kennedy. Speaking of people who are targeted, for whatever reason, I see a lot of similarities between Robert F. Kennedy and Rand Paul. They're both heavily involved in the vaccine debate, going after Big Pharma, going after Anthony Fauci. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is one of the most censored guys in the United States, possibly more censored than Trump right now because Trump has his own outlet. So here's Robert F. Kennedy making the point that the Democrat National Committee, who's supposed to work for him, well, in theory, is trying to censor him out of a censorship meeting.
The NC does not want me running against the president. First of all, you had 102 congresspeople signing a letter to the committee chair asking that I not be allowed to speak. So they actually tried to censor a censorship debate. And I was in the debate for a very good reason, which is that
you've been censored.
Well, I was the key person being censored. I'm all over the judicial decision. And I was clearly censored for political purposes. And, that's something the government is not supposed to do. And Democrats ought to know that. I mean,
any Democrat pull you aside? Any Democrat pull you aside and say, I don't think it should have been handled this way?
No, that has not happened yet. But there are Democrats who didn't sign the letter. So, and I'm actually interested in looking at that, who they were.
All right, so hilariously, the Democrats trying to censor their own fellow Democrat from a censorship speech. It's just unreal, the stuff that's going on there.
Their only play with him is censored because he's just destroying them from the inside.
Yeah, and he will actually blow up the party as bad as Donald Trump has blown up the Republican Party. Like, I truly do think that Robert Kennedy Jr. can bring the Democrats back to 1990s levels of corruption, which is like, what, 50% of what it is now?
I can rein it back in a little bit.
I guess the better way to say that is to fill some seats with actual honest people.
Yeah, constitutional democratic patriots.
Yeah. And from the looks of it, for many, many years, you're still going to be outnumbered by the corrupt ones.
Yeah.
But it's like, Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill. You just got to keep doing it. You got to keep finding actual, genuine people. And you have to make sure that you don't have rigged voting machines even to participate. Otherwise, you're screwed from the start. And speaking of censorship, we got Nobel Prize winner here, silenced by IMF, after saying, "I don't believe there is a climate crisis." So this is on humanevents.com by Thomas Stevenson. Nobel laureate Dr. John Clauser, who has disagreed with President Joe Biden's climate change policies, was slated to present at a seminar on climate models to the International Monetary Fund. His talk was canceled after director of the Independent Evaluation Office for the IMF, Pablo Moreno, read the information for Clauser's talk, which questioned the climate crisis. Dr. Clauser was awarded a Nobel Prize in 2021 for his work in the development of computer models to track global warming, and won another for physics in 2022. Clauser has been critical of other climate models for not taking into account the factor of visible light reflected by cumulus clouds that cover the Earth, and he made a model that took it into account. Failing to incorporate the factor of clouds reflecting light back into space overestimates climate temperature increases. Okay, so he basically caught on to their scam on some of these other climate models. He developed his own, won the Nobel Prize, which actually is surprising to me because it seems like Nobel Prize winners are always globalists, right? Working for their schemes. But now, so he's come out, and ironically, it's the director of the Independent Evaluation Office.
Yeah, how suspect does that sound?
Yeah, that shuts him down, right? So how independent that is. That's just, interesting stuff. And then we got one last one. This is kind of on a sad note, but there's some good and some bad to it. So anyway, there was a great principal. This is reported by True North News. Principal pays ultimate price for taking on woke school board by Sue-Ann Levy. Longtime Toronto District School Board Principal Richard Bilkstow took on the aggressive anti-black racism bullies at the board and paid the ultimate price for doing so. Humiliated by a, quote, race expert hired by the board to preach anti-black racism dogma, left hung to dry by his peers and canceled by his TDSB superiors. The celebrated principal took his own life last week. There's no question that these events and the lack of support from the TDSB caused him intense stress and mental suffering. So, long story short, we'll post this below. But he was in an entrenched battle, basically being called a racist by the school boards just for questioning what these people were teaching in his own school was true and accurate, which we know it isn't. It was the critical race theory bullshit.
It's Marxist propaganda. Yeah, it's serving a purpose to destroy our country.
So anyways, he stands up to them, becomes disillusioned probably with everybody that he was working with, couldn't live with them, or just didn't want to keep on going. Now, I gotta say, obviously, a lot of people come up against this wall where it feels like you're the only sane person in the room or in your job or whatever else. And I would encourage everybody to keep your head on straight. Like, the world as a whole is moving in the right direction. We could have been crushed back in March of last year, and now we're watching all the globalists getting crushed. You got to keep yourself around like-minded people. Find places you can meet them, and don't take this stuff too seriously, because everybody has to live through some time in world history. We got a damn entertaining one. What do you think, Jack?
Absolutely. And make sure you're getting a bit of exercise, right? Like, go outside for a walk, get rid of your headphones and stuff. Just like take some time to relax, unplug. Exactly. Keep yourself healthy. Keep your mind healthy. And we're getting through this.
Yep. That vitamin D always keeps you in a better mindset.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, this has been the Saving Canada podcast, episode 229 in the books. I'm Bartholomew Crenshaw signing off.
And I'm Jack Newsman.